There are some words that we just never want to hear. Words like stage 4 cancer or you have Alzheimer's disease. Such news would understandably fill anyone with dread and subsequent depression. But do we succumb to the all-encompassing sadness, or do we face the reality of our situation with a more hopeful attitude? Maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe we come to acceptance only after a big adjustment in mindset and what the future now holds. That's how it was for world-renowned flutist, writer, and journalist Eugenia Zuckerman when she found out she had stage 1 dementia and Alzheimer's at 72 years old. She writes about learning to live with the disease in the book Like Falling Through a Cloud, a lyrical memoir of coping with forgetfulness, confusion, and a dreaded diagnosis. Here's Zuckerman reciting one of the poems from her book. The entry is titled Marbles.
Marbles. Maybe mine are lost, or maybe they're rolling around in my head looking for a place to land, or maybe not. My daughters tell me to get tested. Tested for what, I ask, even though I know for what. But it's for what I don't want to know, so I let the marbles roll around in a swirl of distracting colors because I don't want to listen to them, the daughters, because if I hear them, I will be very afraid. And this mother cannot be that mother. Not ever. Never.
The poem reflects on a period of confusion and denial before her diagnosis. While Zuckerman couldn't come to terms with what was fully happening, from the outside, her family could see the visible cognitive decline.
They were seeing and hearing that I was making mistakes, that I was forgetting things, I was repeating myself, and I was in denial, of course, that anything was wrong at all. But at a certain point, I decided, okay, I'll get them off my neck and I'll go with them and we'll see what's up. And sure enough, there was a degree of dementia. And that was a difficult diagnosis, difficult for everyone who gets that diagnosis.
Zuckerman remembers turning to poetry to express herself on that day when she was diagnosed. From her many years as a professional musician and writer, putting her feelings down on paper was a well-worn channel that she could rely on.
I went home from the hospital and I went up to my apartment. I sat at my desk and I stared at the wall for a while. And then, for whatever reason, I picked up a paper and pencil and started to write. And what came out was in verse. And that surprised me, although I've written a lot of poetry. But this book is truly a book that is in verse.
Through poetry, reflection, and the support of her family and friends, Zuckerman is in a better headspace today. However, it definitely didn't start out that way.
When you get the diagnosis of dementia, it is kind of terrifying. When I was diagnosed, I was upset, of course. I was angry. I was everything I think you can think of that goes through your mind. Let's face it, it's a death sentence having this disease.
That's Zuckerman's husband in the background, helping her recall a word she can't fully grasp every now and then. She writes about the terror of forgetfulness and the unknown in the poem All Aboard.
Just across the aisle, staring straight ahead, no frown, no smile, sits a woman alone, my age or a bit older, folding and unfolding a piece of paper. She turns and I see her face, dead eyes, mouth clamped shut, staring, just staring at me, folding and unfolding. Is she thinking? Is she awake? Should I ask if she needs help? I attempt to smile, and she slowly turns away, which makes me fear one day I too may be on this train, just folding and unfolding.
On days when these fears over the loss of control threaten to get the better of her, Zuckerman feels lucky to lean on the familiarity of playing the flute or putting her thoughts down on paper.
I am so lucky to be able to make music because, if I'm feeling cranky, I really am someone who can go upstairs, take out my flute, and just play and make myself realize how lucky am I. The key is to wake up and live every single day with beauty and love and positivity.
Zuckerman says that while sinking into a hole of self-pity can be comforting at first, it does nothing in the long term.
Staying in your house and worrying is not going to help you. Getting outside and looking at the sky and you have to find a way to live every day with as much positive thought and energy as you can.
Zuckerman has been living with the disease for 3 years now and says she's coming to a place of acceptance and even gratitude.
The key to this is to remain positive. Dementia is huge in our country now. It is expected to surge to 5 million by 2050. There will be more than 13 million people with dementia. So this is just enormous. And imagine how caregivers have to work so hard to take care of all of us who are dealing with dementia.
It can be taxing for caregivers, family, and friends to have patience with a loved one that's deteriorating, especially when they don't fully understand what it's like to live with the disease. Zuckerman says it can be tough to have these candid conversations and feels like sometimes writing it down instead is the best communicator.
I want to tell you a story about a man who came to one of my book signings. And he came up to me after everyone was leaving, and he bought 6 copies of the book. And he told me that he had Alzheimer's, and he couldn't find the words to tell his family what he was feeling. And he said that the book made it possible for him to understand what this was all about to his family, and it made a huge difference. I do think caregivers are so important to people with Alzheimer's. It's difficult to be a caregiver, especially because there's an amount of being mixed up, like I was just then speaking to you. And I think that families have to have a lot of patience. And meeting this man and realizing that the book helped him that much was a beautiful gift to me.
A diagnosis of Alzheimer's can be traumatic for anyone, but Zuckerman eventually found the courage to move past the negatives and find happiness again.
I think everybody has a choice. You're either going to curl up and be miserable, or you can say, listen, I've been dealt a tough card, but I can deal with it.
Eugenia Zuckerman's book is Like Falling Through a Cloud, a lyrical memoir of coping with forgetfulness, confusion, and a dreaded diagnosis. Available now. You can learn more about all of our guests by visiting our website at viewpointsradio.org. This segment is written and produced by Polly Hansen and Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
Most primary care doctors expect to see more people with dementia over the next 5 years. But a new survey shows half of them don't think the medical profession is ready. Primary care physicians are on the front lines of dementia care, but nearly a third are never or only sometimes comfortable answering patient questions about it. Nearly 2 in 5 say they're never or only sometimes comfortable making a diagnosis. That's deeply concerning to Dr. Joanne Pike, Chief Program Officer of the Alzheimer's Association.
We're heading toward a medical emergency when it comes to ensuring dementia care will be available for all who need it. It's critical that stakeholders work together to reverse the shortage of dementia care specialists and enhance dementia care education for primary care providers.
The survey is part of the Alzheimer's Association 2020 Alzheimer's Disease Facts and Figures Report, which finds that, barring medical breakthroughs, the number of people with Alzheimer's dementia may nearly triple in the next 30 years. Find out more at alz.org.
Thank you for listening to Viewpoints Radio, a production of Media Tracks Communications. If you enjoyed this broadcast, please support our show by subscribing, sharing it with a friend, and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can find more Viewpoints stories on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and viewpointsonline.net. Also, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Viewpoints Radio. Coming up next week.
We will come out stronger, smarter, with some new ways of doing things.
Finding the silver lining during these trying times. Then,
I'm like the pillars of appropriateness. How did I get there? This is how. But I also wanted to explain myself to my kids at the same time.
The life lessons of actress Drew Barrymore. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.